Hello and welcome again to Politics and Societies of Southeast Europe. We're continuing our discussion of religion in Southeast Europe. Now, in the last section, we talked about some general ways of viewing the social and political role of religion in the contemporary period, and also made an observation about the states of Southeast Europe, that religion takes on a uniquely political role, and it's a uniquely political role that is especially marked by the strong association of religious identity with ethnic and national identity. And the final observation that we made in there was that this takes on a special kind of valence, a special kind of importance in environments of religious diversity. So I want to talk a little bit about religious diversity because historically, Southeast Europe has been diverse in terms of religion. This has sometimes been a source of harmony, and it has sometimes been a source of conflict. And the conflict, if we want to emphasize that element of it, is a part of global conflicts that are contemporaneous with the development of religion. So where does religious difference in the region come from? Let's go back a long time. Let's go back to the year 395 AD, the division of the Roman Empire into the Eastern and the Western Roman Empires. The Eastern part of the Roman Empire with its capital in Byzantium, what is now called Istanbul, and the Western part with its capital in Rome. So it is at this point that the largest global power in Europe and the area surrounding Europe divided into two centers of power that were competing, that developed politically, culturally, and in terms of religion in different ways. And this coincides with the period where Christianity is rising and becoming the dominant religion, will quickly become the dominant religion in all of Europe. The political division of the Roman Empire over time comes to be reflected in religious division. And this division becomes more formal with the so-called schism, the split of the Christian church into its Western and Eastern branches with some competitors, with some portion of the territories in Europe that are dominated by the Christian religion coming to be associated with what would become the Catholic Church, some other places later becoming Protestant or following other variants, and the eastern portions, the ones associated with the eastern part of the Roman Empire, developing what would become the Orthodox religion. So it's at this point that you get the division of faiths within Christianity competing with one another, each representing the other as a heresy and themselves as the true faith. What's interesting for us, I think, is that if you look at the line where the yellow portion ends and where the Baba Ganoush colored portion begins, that is the line between territories where the Catholic faith is dominant and territories where the Orthodox faith is dominant, you'll see that runs right through Southeast Europe. This becomes a border zone and an area of confrontation when there is confrontation between these competing religious traditions. And this is reflected in part in the contemporary population of the region. So let's look at another map. This map is showing you the contemporary states of Southeast Europe, and they are divided by color according to what religious group is in the majority on different territories. So the purplish part is a place where the Catholic religion is dominant in the population. The green part, where Orthodox Christianity is dominant, has a majority of Orthodox believers as members of the population. The yellow parts are where Islamic religion is dominant. So you can see all three. What I think is important here is that the distribution of religious majorities and minorities partly corresponds to the borders of states and partly does not. And within these states, all of these maps showing that a majority exists somewhere, it is at least slightly misleading to represent them that way, because wherever there are majorities, there are also minorities, and in some places the minorities are smaller, and in some places the minorities are larger. Now, if you want to ask, where does this relatively large Islamic population come from? And it is in fact in the states of Southeast Europe, in Albania, in Kosovo, in parts of Bosnia and Herzegovina, in parts of Serbia and Montenegro, some parts also of Bulgaria and Greece. These are the only parts of Europe where there are populations with an Islamic majority. Couple of theories. There is the dominant theory, and the dominant theory is that this is territory that was under the political control of the Ottoman Empire for several centuries, and large parts of the population decided that they would move to the Islamic religion because the Ottoman Empire provided benefits for people. According to religion, there were greater benefits for members of the dominant religion, the Islamic religion. These people could hold public office, they could own property. What this means is that it was mostly urban populations in most cases who became Islamic, and in some places formed population centers that became majorities of the population. I'm going to give you another theory as to where the Islamic population in this part of Europe comes from that you should take with a grain of salt. And that is this, that during the time that Christianity was developing and would eventually coalesce into the religious communities that are familiar to us now, there were a number of religious movements, some of which were short-lived. One of them was the Bogomils, a very interesting movement by itself, and as you can see, it had followers all over Europe. This map is showing you where there were centers of Bogomil activity in Europe in the period when the Bogomils were active between the 10th and 15th century, and you can see that they went into France and Germany. There was even a Bogomil community in London, but the big center of Bogomils was in the Balkans, in Southeast Europe. The historical argument goes that the Bogomil movement was suppressed by the dominant religious movements in these territories, and that many of the Bogomils, rather than joining the Catholic or Orthodox churches as they were pressured to do, joined the Islamic faith instead, because it was a way, particularly in the territories controlled by the Ottoman Empire, of getting a form of protection. How much faith should we put in this theory? Let's say that it is probably true that some Bogomils at a time of repression did seek protection in Islamic institutions, but that the evidence that this accounts for majority or even a very significant part of the contemporary Islamic population in the region is pretty weak. What it does show us, though, is that local religions, folk traditions, local population patterns play a role in the development of religious majorities and minorities in different parts of the region now.